and welcome to the multitaction showcase tutorial series. In this first tutorial, we're going to have an overview of the showcased application itself. To begin with, let's review some of the key features. First of all, Showcase has been designed to show off rich media assets. So that means things like videos, images, PDF files, and even websites can all be displayed and controlled. That control comes from the ability to have complete design control over how somebody interacts with those assets. The types of places you find the Showcase application running would be executive briefing centers, visitor areas, and corporate lobbies. Anywhere where you want to be able to either tell a story, demonstrate content, or allow a visitor or a customer to safely navigate and explore content by themselves. It's been designed for interactive displays, so touch displays, and you can deploy it on a single screen, on interactive tables or large video walls. This is a multitaction software solution, so it works best on multitaction displays because it can take advantage of some of the unique capabilities that the multitaction touch displays have. Things like, for example, the fact that the camera system can see codes and react to a two-dimensional something similar to a QR code type image. The fact that it can deliver the most responsive touch experience also lends itself well to this application. However, it will work perfectly well on third-party touch systems. Probably the most powerful part of the solution, however, is the web-based editor. It's literally a drag and drop capability that allows you to deploy assets straight onto the display surface. This would typically have taken 10 or more days of professional services engagement, and now you can on your own develop within a couple of hours very powerful branded rich media interactive experiences for visitors and customers. So let's now take a look at a running application. What you see here is an animated background, although you could have a static image or you could have a video background. The menus that are floating across the system, and although you can't see my finger, I am actually touching this, which is why it's behaving the way it is rather than following the track that the other options are. They're called teaser menus, and when you touch on a teaser menu, based on what's been defined, other content can be explored. In addition, we have a finger menu, which when you touch and hold the display, brings out a whole new level of content that you can control and program. But the real power of this is the fact that it's very easy to create multiple applications with very different look, branding, and feel. It's also very easy to switch. So if I go across to the editor and switch to a brand new application, you can see now what I have is essentially a static image. Now over here on this building, I have a hotspot defined. So if on the display, I touch that building, it launches a preset URL to the website, which in this case is just delivering more information about that particular object. And you can see that would be quite a powerful capability if this was an image, say, of static products, for example, or indeed a map or a diagram of a location, and you wanted to allow the user to get more information about each of those points. You can see the applications are really quite broad. So this is clearly the showy side of the application. Now let's go into the web editor and see where the work's done to create these. So here we are in the web editor, and let's take a moment to quickly orient ourselves. This is the app launcher window, and what you can see is a series of applications and the components that make up an individual application. And we'll review these in more detail in a moment. But the essential things to know is that with each application, there is a structure, there's a theme, and sometimes if it's defined, there is a service set. When you saw me switch the application just now, all I did was literally click on Run, and it brought the new application up to the window. If the application's running and you're making edits on that application, when you save them, those edits will become live immediately. If you're working on an application that's not currently running, then when you've made those changes and you save them, and then you run that application, all of those changes will appear at that point. To begin with, we'll look up here at the media library. And if I click up here in the top right-hand corner, you'll see that it opens out my media library files and folders. All of the assets that you want to use in the application can be stored in here, and you can simply name, rename, create new folders in here to create the structure that you want. Any of the objects that you click on down here, you'll see an example of what that content is. Over on the left-hand side here, you'll see we have the main parts that make up the individual applications. And we mentioned already structures, themes, and services. We'll go into those in a little more detail in a moment. Content sets are what governs the information that's inside the finger menus. So if you recall, when I touched the screen and brought up the finger menu, the bubbles that were within that and the content that they drive are all driven by the content sets. The widget library is a quick way of me going in and editing the widgets that have been set up that are used in the application that I'm looking at. The CODIS database is where I can put the code numbers in that correspond to the two-dimensional codes that you might be using on your CODIS markers. So recall when I talked about customers who use this for a personal ID to be able to email content, that's the way you would set that up. Another very common use case for the CODIS markers is if you have cards that represent different products or services or solution areas. If you touch the screen with those, and remember this only works on a multitaction display because of the camera system, when you touch the screen with one of those markers, it will launch whatever content you have defined against it. The app launcher screen we've looked at already, and import-export is a way that you can actually move applications around between different servers. Let's briefly take a quick look at structures. Inside of each application, there are 4 key areas that make up the display area. You have the background, down the bottom here. You have the main, where the principal content and the widgets that control that content are deployed. This is where we define the finger menu system, and this is where we can define an overlay, which could be an animation or some sort of effect that we want to put on top of the application. So let's take a minute to review the information that we've just been looking at. So the main parts of a showcase application display area are split into these 4 key parts. The background here is where I can put literally my background. So that could be a static image, a video, or an animated image of some sort. The main part is where I define the assets, the primary assets that are going to be used in the interactive experience and how those are going to be controlled. The menu layer is where I can put my finger menu. So when you touch and hold the display area, that's the menu system that will come up. And remember, that was controlled by the content sets. And then the overlay allows me to put some sort of basic effect over the top. So for example, one of the effects that's supplied with the system is a ripple effect, which is particularly useful if you're using some sort of water type of image, for example. Applications themselves are constructed of these 3 parts: the structure, the theme, and the service set. We've just reviewed the 4 display layers. So the structure is where we define the assets and the control widgets. The theme contains the default settings for all the widgets. So say, for example, I simply want to have an image appear on the display. I drop a control widget in, which is an image viewer. I then simply drag and drop the image from the media library to that viewer. And then I can control within the structure, I can control where it fits, how big it is, and what happens to it. Can the user rotate it? Can they make it bigger? Can they make it smaller? Can they delete it? I can do that separately for every image in the structure if I want to, or I can simply default that to the theme. So the theme can be a very powerful tool, because if I want all my images to be handled the same way in the entire application, I can simply let them all default to the settings that I define in the theme. Some applications have service sets applied. We'll cover this in one of the more advanced tutorials, but there are 2 key parts here. One is you could turn on the email service, and we've referenced that a couple of times with how if I put a CODIS marker to the screen, it knows that that belongs to an individual and their email address, and so you can send the email. For that to work, we have to attach the email service to the application. The other is another advanced option, which is the ability to collect statistics on how the application is actually being used, which assets are being touched and which assets are being used the most. If we think about the structure of the application, this is an example of the basic control widgets. There are a large number of widgets available within the application, but these are the ones that are most commonly used. The codec detector, that's how we detect those 2D codes. Content hotspot, so remember in my cityscape when I touched on a building and it launched into the website, that's how you control that. An image viewer simply shows a high-res picture. A PDF book, this is a great way of showing PDFs because someone can literally flick through it like an animated book. The teaser menu is those floating menu options that you recall I showed you on the first example application. The video viewer, just like the image viewer, shows video type assets, and the web browser can be supplied a URL to launch into a website. And with all of these, there's the capability to control what size they are, where they are, how they're interacted with, and how they disappear from the display once you're done. If we take a quick look at the finger menus, there are 4 key components to a finger menu. There's the opening animation, what happens when I touch the screen and hold it. There's the content set, so remember that determines what's behind each of the bubbles. If you look over here in this diagram, you'll see each one of those bubbles leads to either another menu or directly to content, and it's the content set that determines that. How these bubbles actually appear is determined by the bubble type. Here I've actually got a ring around the outside of the bubble, but you don't have to do that. You can change the way those look. The connectors and how those connectors behave can also be controlled. Here we've got a simple white line that goes from thick to thin, but you could, for example, use an image and create a totally different type, and we'll cover that in one of the more advanced tutorials. So that concludes this overview tutorial of the Showcase application. Thank you for watching. Keep a lookout for more tutorials that will look at things like how can I create an application from scratch, how do I implement finger menus, and some of the more advanced features and functions of the application. Thanks. As always, if you need more information or help, go to our website at www.multitaction.com and simply click on the Contact Us button. Thanks.